Thank you for participating in the Texas Juvenile Justice Department's e-learning series. My name is Delisha McClain and I will be narrating today's training on officer safety and mechanical restraints. Before we begin, please ensure you have downloaded the participant guide as we will refer to it throughout the course. This e-learning course is provided as an alternative to a live training presentation. The Juvenile Justice Training Academy does not guarantee that this option is in any way more or less suitable to prepare the trainee for the performance of their job duties. It is the sole responsibility of the employer to ensure that trainees are adequately prepared for the TJJD certification exam. Scenarios may be included, however, activities have been removed when interaction or engagement with others is necessary. Scenarios, if used, are to evaluate comprehension of the material by the trainee and not intended to provide examples from the certification exam. Upon completion of viewing this e-learning course, the employer is responsible for completing any and all necessary documentation that the training on this mandatory topic was completed by the trainee. No certificate will be generated after viewing this e-course. Thank you. So why do you think safety is important as a juvenile probation officer? This quote by Dr. Mayo, "That which can be foreseen can be prevented," implies that there are things which can be done in order to prevent incidents from occurring. Juveniles you supervise and meet with, whether in the office or the community, will be unfamiliar to you, and safety must be a priority. Each day we have a responsibility to arrive home safely, and to do that, you must commit to keeping yourself and the juveniles you supervise safe. We will talk about strategies to go about this today. Let me outline for you the performance objectives for today's course. First, you will be able to summarize safety measures for juvenile probation officers covered in this training. Second, you'll be able to outline strategic ways to supervise juveniles in and out of the office. And finally, given a scenario, you will be able to apply the correct Texas Administrative Code or TAC rules regarding the use of mechanical restraints. Being a juvenile probation officer will require daily interactions with people you may not know. The juveniles you supervise and neighborhoods you visit will likely look like what you see on the slide. Whether visiting a juvenile in the office or at their home, safety should not be taken lightly. Safety is not just about the people you meet, though. It also involves your attitude and attention to detail. Failure to focus on tasks and rushing to meet deadlines create unnecessary safety risks. Complacency and inattention to detail also create risks, and the safety of you and juveniles you supervise will depend on your proactive approach. Let's look at the definition of proactive. Being proactive is defined as acting in advance of a future situation instead of simply reacting. It means taking precautions before a potential situation occurs. As you will see, the job of a juvenile probation officer is unpredictable. Although you may have a plan for the day, oftentimes something happens to force development of a new one. Strategically preparing for unknown situations aids in your safety and the safety of juveniles being supervised. Let's talk about some proactive strategies you can implement while performing your job duties, which can enhance your safety. One step to being proactive with your safety is to establish officer presence among juveniles and colleagues. Officer presence is the ability to diffuse a situation by exuding professionalism and appearing calm, confident, and non-threatening. Let's watch a brief video on officer presence. The video, intended for police officers, is also relevant to us as juvenile probation officers. The video emphasized the motto, look sharp, act sharp, and be sharp. For looking sharp, always remember, assessments are made about you within the first 30 seconds of a meeting. Make it count. Always look sharp, which means being well-groomed and dressed professionally. Finally, consider this. If you look sharp, people will assume you are sharp. If you look sloppy, people will assume you perform sloppy work. Moving on to acting sharp. Carry yourself with confidence and professionalism and be aware of what is expected of you. Communicate with confidence, verbally or not. Management consultant Peter Drucker said, "The most important thing in communication is to hear what isn't being said." Understanding nonverbal communication is essential when interacting with juveniles and families. Finally, a few points about being sharp. Always expect the unexpected. Treat people fairly. Take care of yourself and collaborate with your team. And lastly, avoid complacency. Your safety will be at risk if you don't. Let's continue our discussion with how it will also be important for you to conduct yourself appropriately when a juvenile or their family is agitated. There are 4 levels of agitation we will discuss today, starting with anxiousness. When we feel anxious, we often exhibit behaviors signaling low-level fear, nervousness, and/or mild confusion. As you are meeting with and observing juveniles, read nonverbal cues as signals identifying how they are feeling. A few behaviors suggesting anxiousness can include pacing or rocking, tapping or bouncing of a foot or hand, constant sitting and standing, and also drumming of hands or objects. A few tips on how to respond to this behavior: show interest and concern, listen to what is being said, and always remember, don't be judgmental. Let's talk about defensiveness next. When feeling defensive, a juvenile is trying to protect themselves against a real or imagined threat. Some behaviors which may signal someone is feeling this way include closed body language, avoided eye contact, pronounced pacing, and a controlled voice. Some tips on how to respond to this: note your surroundings, including exits, physical position in relation to the juvenile, and objects in the office which could become potential weapons. Also, ask direct, specific questions in an attempt to calm the juvenile down. The more agitated a juvenile becomes, the easier it is for them to tune you out. Let's continue and talk about aggressiveness. Aggressive is defined as an intentional behavior used to intimidate or control a person or situation. A few behaviors signaling feelings of aggressiveness include loud vocal tirades, the use of profanity, erratic eye movement, closed fists, pushing or throwing property, and even muscle flexing. Some ways that you can respond to aggressive behavior include being direct and clear on the advantages of calming down. Use a calm tone of voice when communicating. Steer clear of appearing intimidating or challenging. And if all else fails, leave the situation. Call for help if you can, and direct the juvenile to leave if they are in your office. Let's move on to dangerousness. With a dangerous juvenile, the threat of physical injury is probable. Dangerousness is defined as an intentional behavior focused in a specific direction. Some behaviors to look for: flared nostrils or breathing through the mouth, an offensive posture, or a sudden momentary calm. Some tips to deal with this behavior: emphasize legal action if behavior is acted upon, know your escape routes, and what can be used as a weapon in your office. Of course, you should never challenge a juvenile and always be ready to move quickly. Lastly, call for help and remove yourself safely from the situation. So far today, we have talked about officer presence, agitation levels, and responses. Let's review this section with a few questions. For each question, Click on your answer and proceed until you have finished the section review. Nonverbal communication often contains important information. You are correct. Nonverbal communication. Sorry, that answer is incorrect. Please try again. Two primary factors contributing to excellence in office. You are correct. Confidence is a. When interacting with a dangerous juvenile, you should maintain a. You are correct. Juvenile probation officer. There are 5 mental states of awareness or conditions we will talk about today. Knowing these conditions will assist you in managing challenging situations. The first mental state is condition white, which is defined as a state of environmental obliviousness. Some indicators you may be in condition white include being unconcerned about what's happening around you, feeling safe and familiar in your surroundings, and having a relaxed state of mind. While in condition white, you likely would not be able to handle a threat because it would be a shock to you and a plan would be difficult to execute. A juvenile probation officer should not be in this state while on duty. The next state is condition yellow, characterized by being in a relaxed but alert state. This is considered the optimal level of awareness for juvenile probation officers and must always be maintained. This state can be maintained for long periods of time, and some indicators you are at this level include being cautious but not tense and being aware of the possibility of a threat. Next is condition orange, defined as a state of alarm. Here, a threat has been identified, a confrontation is probable, and you have implemented a plan to get out of the situation. Keep in mind, you cannot remain in this state for long periods. The next mental state is condition red, or a state of combat. Here, a threat is inevitable and right in front of you. You have to neutralize a threat quickly, and you must seek help immediately. Again, you cannot remain in this state for long. Lastly, condition black is a state of panic, frenzy, and paralysis. This is the most debilitating state, and you will likely be ineffective at protecting yourself, and you risk being injured because you are frozen in fear. Remember, condition yellow is the optimal state of awareness for juvenile probation officers while on duty. Along with your own state of awareness, you need to also be aware of the use of force continuum if you find you have to defend yourself. I will now be introducing the use of force continuum and how it can be used to maintain your safety. If a juvenile is threatening you with potential lethal consequences, your local policy will dictate how you should proceed. Remember, while the following material is considered best practice, it is offered merely as an additional resource for enhancing your safety. The first action in the continuum is officer presence, which we have talked about already. This is the first action because professional presence can de-escalate a situation and perhaps even avoid instigation completely. Second is verbal skills, which along with officer presence will aid in maintaining juvenile compliance while communicating in a neutral tone. The remaining actions or techniques, including empty hand techniques or soft hard physical control, for example grabs or palm heel strikes, intermediate weapons, for example OC spray, and lethal force, for example firearms, require specialized training, and you must follow the Texas Administrative Code Chapter 341 rules as well as comply with your local policy and procedure. You will learn more about appropriate actions you can take in the Legal Liabilities course, as well as the Texas Family Code and Related Laws course. Do keep in mind, self-defense should only be used when the amount and type of force used is reasonably necessary and appropriate to ensure the security of juveniles, the facility, a program, or department. Again, follow local policy and procedure with respect to defending yourself. Direct any additional questions you may have to your local training department. After talking about the states of awareness and the use of force continuum, let's review with a few questions. For each question, click on your answer and proceed until you have finished this section review. Which mental state of awareness should a juvenile probation officer? You are correct. Condition yellow is this. Officer presence and verbal skills will aid you with the. You are correct. Verbal de-escalation. No matter the supervision classification of juveniles on your caseload, much of your time will be spent meeting with them in your office. Although a somewhat controlled environment, you will not be able to guarantee dangerous situations won't occur. The quote by Scott Kirshner, "There is no imaginary safety bubble around your office that magically protects you from harm," reminds you that being complacent in your office places your safety at risk. There are some proactive measures you can practice in an attempt to prevent situations in your office. First, let's focus on accessibility. Just over a quarter of assaults on adult probation officers occur at the office, and of those, almost half are committed by probationers. Those percentages are concerning, especially if you spend much of your time in the office meeting with clients. That's why establishing how accessible you are with juveniles and their families will be critical. Let me give you a few tips with respect to your office availability, personal office space, and building security. In terms of office hours, clearly defined time should be established regarding when families can meet with you. Keep unannounced visits to a minimum by establishing clear guidelines of your availability. Use your discretion to determine if a situation warrants your immediate attention. Eventually, you will become familiar with juveniles on your caseload and be able to assess their individual needs. With respect to your physical office, remember, juveniles should not be left in your office unsupervised. Ask juveniles to wait in the lobby if you are called out of your office and keep the door ajar at all times. Lastly, be mindful of security issues when juveniles report to your office. Be aware of all entrances and exits to your building. Juveniles should always sign in with support staff, and if you happen to suspect a juvenile has a weapon or any suspicious activity, it's imperative you know your local department's search policy. Keep in mind, only the juvenile or authorized visitors should be allowed in your office. You should not provide your personal contact information unless required, and always maintain professional boundaries. Next, I'm going to talk with you about your office configuration, where personal belongings and supplies should be kept, and concealing confidential information. With respect to office configuration, the first thing you should do is make sure you have clear access to the exit. Make every effort to position your desk so if a situation does escalate, you are able to exit your office first, and if you can, make sure you have a clear view of who comes in and out of your office. Also, keep objects like staplers, pens, and pencils inside your desk. And while it's nice to have personal pictures, minimize the amount you display and position them in such a way that they can only be seen from behind your desk. Lastly, if you have a bulletin board, make sure it doesn't display personal information, and always stow and lock your handbag, briefcase, personal belongings, and other juvenile case files. Before moving on to the next section in the course, let's review the topics we just covered. For each question, click on your answer and proceed until you have finished this section review. It is okay to allow a juvenile and his friend to meet with you. You are correct. Only the juvenile. Why should you be mindful of accessibility in your role as? You are correct. Establishing your assessment. As a juvenile probation officer, you will be required to conduct field visits to include home, school, or even employment visits. Certainly, venturing outside of the office will present a unique set of challenges, but the benefits you will receive will outweigh those. Field visits are ideal because they provide insight into a juvenile's personal life and helps build rapport. A thorough field visit can be explained in 3 phases: the pre-visit, the visit, and the post-visit. Let's start with the pre-visit. The pre-visit is the first step in completing a comprehensive field meeting. Some strategies you can implement: prepare a contact fact sheet with names, information of where you're going, the address, phone number, and a list of family members if you're going to a home. Bring only necessary items with you and leave personal belongings such as large handbags or bulky briefcases at the office. You should wear comfortable business casual clothes and shoes and inform your office support staff of your whereabouts, making sure your cell phone is fully charged. Be mindful of the time you are going to conduct your visit. It's best to visit as early as possible. Friday afternoon home visits may not be a good idea. Lastly, plan visits with a partner if you can. Try to avoid doing visits alone. Now to the visit itself. When you are conducting a visit, particularly at a residence, remember to always follow your local departmental policies, and if at any time you are uncomfortable, leave and reschedule the visit. Be sure to observe your surroundings before getting out of your car and avoid parking your vehicle in the driveway or where it can be blocked in. As you approach the door, scan the area, keeping your guard up, and don't stand directly in front of the door before entering. Always ask who is present and if any pets are in the house that need to be secured. If juvenile is alone, follow departmental policy regarding whether you should enter the residence or reschedule the visit. If you proceed, ideally you should conduct the visit on the porch, particularly if it is a juvenile of the opposite sex. Once inside, ask that all loud items be turned off and stay as close to the front door as you can. Ask that the door remain unlocked and remember to maintain your professional demeanor regardless of the conditions inside the house. If you observe a weapon or drugs, end the visit and document your observations later, as well as file a report if necessary. As soon as pertinent business is complete, you should end the visit and exit the home. But you aren't done. There are still a few things to consider as you leave. Let's talk about the post-visit. The post-visit is just as critical as the first 2 phases. Recognize you should continue your vigilance and keep your guard up as you walk back to your car. Scan the environment, and once inside your car, lock the doors. If anything unusual occurred during the visit and you are safely locked inside your vehicle, call and leave yourself a voicemail or make a note to jog your memory later. Make sure you are not being followed, and when you return to the office, document your visit thoroughly. Remember, field visits provide valuable information, and while these visits help with evaluating a juvenile's treatment goals, your safety must continue to be a top priority. Let's review the topics we just covered. For each question, click on your answer and proceed until you have finished the section review. The most appropriate time to conduct a field visit is... You are correct. The earlier a field visits, particularly home visits, are important. You are correct. Field visits We will now talk about our last topic of the day, mechanical restraints. Mechanical restraints should only be used on juveniles in certain instances, including imminent threats of self-injury, injury to others, or serious property damage. Chapter 341, Subchapter G of the Texas Administrative Code outlines the rules regarding restraints. You have a copy of the rules in the appendix section of your participant guide. Mechanical restraint should only be applied by juvenile probation officers who have been trained in an improved physical restraint technique and the use of mechanical restraints. I'm going to guide you through a quick activity in which we will look at a few scenarios and determine if the JPO is in compliance with the TAC restraint rules. You can refer to your copy of the standards and determine the best answer for each scenario. In this scenario, the JPO is meeting with this juvenile in the... You are correct. According to TAC 3... Sorry, that answer is incorrect. Please try again. Sorry, that answer is incorrect. Please try again. In this scenario, the JPO is conducting a... You are correct. According to TAC 3... In this scenario, this juvenile has been taken into custody. You are correct. According to TAC... We have covered a great deal of information today. We first discussed how to look sharp, act sharp, and be sharp. We examined how the 5 levels of awareness impacts your safety. We also reviewed levels of defense, agitation levels, and how to respond effectively. We considered tips on how to protect your accessibility in the office and proper preparation and execution of field visits. Lastly, we reviewed the proper use of mechanical restraints based on TAC rules. To summarize today's course on officer safety and mechanical restraints, officer safety should be at the forefront for juvenile probation officers. A key component to officer safety is awareness. And lastly, by being proactive, you keep yourself and the juveniles you supervise safe. Again, I am Delisha McClain, and I want to thank you for completing the TJJD Officer Safety and Mechanical Restraints e-course.